Now, I wonder what you do, speaking of neighbors, what you do with all of the stranger love in the Torah, or the foreigner love.
Yeah, great question. So what I would get out of the way at the start is that there is no moral dilemma here. And I would probably have to do a lot of research with specific cases to highlight that. But what I mean is, storge love should never prevent stranger love.
Right. So it's not love my family over and above loving people outside of my family.
Correct. And I think that's the thing that most people get really concerned about whenever I talk about this. And I've started connecting with other folks about this, bring it out into community. And that's probably the primary pushback that I get, is this worry that if storge love is somehow true and somehow powerful, that it forces you to devalue the stranger. And I just don't see that at work in Torah. I think that it's okay for us to talk about privileging relationships, but simply because a relationship is privileged doesn't mean that you devalue other relationships. And it was actually in your interview with Shai Held.
Right. This came out.
He talked about this, and I loved what he said. And maybe others have said it too, but he was the first to say it that I heard it. Is that what God is doing with love in the Bible goes with the grain of nature.
Right.
And I love that, and I would use that phrase as well. So I'm highlighting these natural relationships that we're born into, where love ought to be.
Right.
It isn't always, and we can talk about that, but simply because that is the natural relationship that we are given, where love is to be found, doesn't mean that alleviates us of any other loving relationships or anything along those lines.
Yeah, and even that's already a controversial statement. I mean, I agree with you, and Shai as well. But his position, it sounds like the one you're developing here, is that loving storge love is actually training for extending that love out. Where you can, of course, I'm thinking of the evolutionary thinking now that says, no, clans hunker down and they only protect their own because of that special bond that they have with one another. There actually is now a larger field of cooperative natural selection that says maybe competition and hunkering down wasn't actually all there was to the story. And so when we talk about what is natural for humans, even early humans, if you think of Göbekli Tepe or 100,000 years before that, you have human groups running around the earth, and maybe it was natural for humans to extend their love and care and concern for people who were not of their clan, in the right, when they weren't trying to kill you, and in the right appropriate circumstances.
Of course.
So, so love in storge becomes love. Preparation for love beyond, right? Which is how it seems how Jesus interprets the Torah, right? Like, if you had loved within Israel properly, then you should know how to extend this out.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Now, I mentioned that phrase "moral dilemma" years ago. I heard a sermon that gave this thought picture, and it's basically a variation on Sophie's Choice. If you're familiar with that ethical, it is a moral dilemma.
Choosing one child to go die to the Nazis, right? So.
Right. You choose one child to live, you have two children. If you don't choose one to live, we'll kill them both. So it forces this choice, which pits parental love against parental love, right? That's the idea. That's what's going on. So this analogy that this pastor used to open his sermon illustration was a fisherman goes out to sea with his son and his son's friend, and a storm comes upon them. The fisherman is a Christian, his son is a Christian, and the friend is not. And this storm comes upon the sea, throws both boys out of the boat, and the fisherman has one rope and an opportunity to save one. And then he goes on throughout the sermon.
Where I think it's going.
It's going exactly where you think it's going. And so he goes through the meat of the sermon, right? We're all on the hook.
Were you there listening to the sermon?
I was there. I had to listen. I'm in the congregation. And so he makes it through his whole sermon, and then he wraps it up right at the end and says, so the fisherman throws the rope to his son's friend because he knew his son would die and be with him in heaven. But this boy needed the rope. And that's what Jesus does for you, is he gives you, there's this cathartic moment for everybody on the edge of their seats. But what he's essentially doing is he's creating a moral dilemma where he pits these two kinds of love against one another, and he forces on the congregation the entirely unnatural choice.
Right.
And then he pietizes that.
Right.
Right? So, all that to say, I take some issue with that.
Yeah. Especially that last move where making it the spiritual choice, the spiritually correct choice is to do that thing that goes against instinct in some way. So I think what I hear you doing is saying, that kind of family loyalty instinct is actually good and true so far as it goes but there is, kind of a via media here. Like there's some line that it crosses where it can be too isolated, nuclear family, too unnatural, that you don't have those bonds, or you have this weird spiritualism where you just say, no, it's to go against to George Costanza, the whole thing, just go against every natural instinct you've ever had. And that there actually is some tension held middle. And I guess the part of your project is going to be developing, what are the nodal points that hold the tension?
Correct. Yeah. So just like we talked about misordered eros, I think that there can be misordered storge as well. The obvious one is incest. We could throw that out. But, people, I think, typically exclusively regard nepotism in a negative light, right? So that might be another malformed storge. I think that there can be good forms of nepotism.
Yeah, I think so.
As a matter of fact, I think the description of the kings in ancient Israel, it's a desire for rightly ordered, well-practiced storge, and so often that goes awry. But just because something goes awry doesn't mean it's bad.
Right.
Necessarily. So you're absolutely right. We definitely need to develop what is that rightly ordered and then that misordered. And if you want to do like Aristotelian categories, you could probably misorder in either direction.
Right.
But yeah.